everyone, and welcome to this presentation on how to support students in developing ideas and organizing a presentation. My name is Claire Lee, and I am the English Language Fellow at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo. I do teacher training with Japanese teachers of English, as you can see in some of these pictures. I went to Harvard Graduate School of Education in Wellesley College, and I was formerly a Fulbright. You can see my little dog here. We're at a shrine in Tokyo. Just to let you know that this session will be recorded and posted on the U.S. Embassy YouTube channel for teachers to be able to view for information. So in this workshop, you will be able to share with students a structure for organizing a presentation. You'll also have a chance to use strategies with students for brainstorming. A couple of things to note. During the main session, please have your microphone on mute. During the breakout rooms, you can have your camera on, and I would like for this to be an opportunity to discuss with your colleagues and other Japanese teachers of English. And if you have questions at any time, please feel free to type them in the chat box. In today's agenda, we'll look at how we can develop ideas and brainstorm. We'll also look at the tone. How can you help students consider tone in a presentation? Then I'll give some ideas for how to organize a presentation and tips for presentations. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll start off with breakout rooms. In breakout rooms, please introduce yourself first, share your name, your school, and what kind of superpower you would have. For example, I could say something like, my name is Claire. I formerly used to teach at Wellesley Middle School, so I was a junior high school teacher. And as far as superpowers, I think the ability to teleport, so move from one place to another without having to commute. I'm from Los Angeles, and one thing you may know about Los Angeles is that the traffic is very, very bad, and I really hate being in traffic. Once you have all shared about yourselves, you can answer this question. What is a successful strategy you use to help students brainstorm or organize their presentations? For example, do you give them a template for the presentation slides? Do you give them a rubric to help them know what they should focus on? Do you give them tips on what they should include in their presentations? Maybe you give a model of what a good presentation looks like. I'll give you about 5 minutes to share in groups. You will be in groups of 3 or 4. Please take about 5 minutes to discuss. Okay, welcome back everyone from the breakout room. We'll just give it about 1 more minute for everyone to return. And thank you so much for sharing. I heard a lot of really wonderful ideas that were shared, including things like giving students guidelines for things like timing of how long, how many slides they need, giving them a structure of what they should include in each slide. Some other strategies that I heard included giving a demonstration presentation so that students know what you are looking for. And another one was to help students research and give them some websites on where they could find information for their presentations. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking some time to share. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. When we are assigning a presentation to students, we want to have us consider first, and then our students consider the purpose of the presentation. There are many different types of presentation, and their structures are often different and the content are different based on their purpose. The way that we approach the speech, how we might research for the speech, and our tone are all going to be affected by the purpose. So 3 common purposes are to inform, to persuade, or to evaluate. For example, the first presentation, to inform, would be to give some information about, for example, a particular country and the culture of that country. So we might give some facts and information about the country in that presentation. In the second one, to persuade, this is often giving some sort of opinion and asking the audience to try and take on that opinion and agree with the speaker. We are trying to convince the audience in these types of presentations. For example, we might have a presentation for students on a topic that they can relate to, such as, should we have school uniforms? So the students will need to persuade the audience either yes, there should be uniforms, or no, there should not be uniforms. The student will have to gather information to try and convince the audience about this opinion. In the third type of presentation that is very common is to evaluate. And this is often looking at something and saying how good or bad it is, or giving some sort of opinion and sharing about how you feel about that. For example, students may have to evaluate, for example, how great a certain program is at the school. In the presentation, they are going to share about that program's strengths and weaknesses, and perhaps try and share why that program should continue or should not continue. An element of this presentation type often does include persuasion, but we're not explicitly asking students to get the audience to believe what we believe. But hopefully by sharing the evidence, we can show that we have a strong opinion and a good opinion. So as we develop the topic for students, we should consider if it is one of these 3, and we should make this very clear to students so that they know how to approach this presentation. Now, developing ideas. Once you have given students a topic, for example, maybe they are researching about different types of high schools around the world, you will select that topic, and students are often more motivated when they're given a choice. So maybe one student is very interested in learning about what high schools are like in America versus Japan, while another student may be more interested in what high schools are like in the UK. Maybe you offer different choices in students choosing different places, like in Cambodia or South Africa or somewhere else in the world. You then should allow them to have some time to brainstorm and research information. It's important that when you ask students to research, that you give them good guidelines about what kinds of sources are appropriate and credible and what sources are not. Often with high school students in grade 1 and maybe grade 2, I like to provide a certain set of websites that they can look at in order to begin their search. I also am very clear about websites are not allowed. For example, I will say that while you can start learning about the topic on Wikipedia, you cannot cite it as a source. You may also want to tell students about whether or not you will allow them to use generative AI, such as ChatGPT, Bard, or Bing. Now, it's important to get students to brainstorm and organize in the first steps of a presentation. Just like how you would help them with their writing and support them in that way, there are many ways in which you can help students brainstorm. The first I mentioned was research. And as I said, I like to provide certain reliable websites. I will give students guidelines. For example, I will say it is okay to use websites that end in .org or .edu. These are websites that are often more credible since they belong to organizations and to the government. Now, other types of websites like .com websites may actually give just opinions or can be anyone's just random thoughts or facts that they are making up. So it's important to teach your students how to choose reliable sources. If your students are feeling stuck on where to find some research, you may also have some texts, some articles that you share with them to get them started. The point of this is to gather as much information as they can to be able to then organize into a speech or a presentation. Another way to brainstorm is known as free writing. Free writing often works well for topics that students are familiar with or with things about their personal opinion. For example, if the speech is going to be about what holiday should be added to Japan's calendar, what national holiday do you think that would be? You can have students free write and think about some different ideas. Free writing is giving students a specific set time, for example, 1 minute, 3 minutes, or 5 minutes, where they are writing and they cannot stop. Sometimes they will not know what to say, and in free write, they might say, type or write, I don't know about this topic. But hopefully, as they continue to write, they will come up with some ideas. They might think of different topics like a holiday for parents or a national holiday for pets. As they come up with ideas, free writing allows them the space to really put what they think on paper. Now, remember, this is not about only having good ideas. When you free write, the idea is to generate as many ideas as possible, both good and bad ideas. We are not evaluating at this stage. Instead, we're just trying to come up with as many as possible in order to then narrow down and select what the presentation will be about. The third strategy is to use graphic organizers. Graphic organizers are different visuals that students can use not just for presentations, but also for writing. So what we're going to do now is we will break up into groups and we will look at some graphic organizers. Let me go ahead and just make this a little bit bigger so everyone can see. So graphic organizers can be used to support students in brainstorming or organizing a speech. You'll see that there are 9 different speech topics, These are adapted from a few different Japanese English textbooks, such as Crown Logic and Expression 1, as well as Crossroads English Communication 2. So for example, a speech topic might be, you are part of the student council at your school. Prepare a speech on why students should join the No Plastic Waste campaign. When you scroll down, you'll see that there are a number of different graphic organizers. They all have different names. For example, the sequence chart is listing steps or events in order of time. So you can see it starts off with first, next, and then last. There's a step-by-step chart, which shows the step and then some details. So we're going to take about 10 minutes. You can look through these graphic organizers, understand what their purpose might be, and then what I would like for you to do is to read each of the speech topics and match them with at least one of the graphic organizers. So let's do number 1 together. This was the one about being part of the student council, and this is a speech on why students should join the No Plastic Waste campaign. Notice that the type of speech that this is a persuasive speech. You are trying to persuade other students to join this campaign. So looking through, which one might fit that the best? So there is actually one called the persuasion map. You write the goal here, for example, join the No Plastic Waste campaign, 3 reasons, and then it asks the students to break it up into more facts and examples. This is a great way to help students brainstorm and organize in order to get some concrete ways to persuade their audience. Now, there isn't just one graphic organizer per topic. There might be another one that also works well. For example, maybe the spider map could work, where the topic is to have students join the plastic waste campaign. And with each of these branches, students can type in different reasons for why other students should join. So 10 minutes, we'll go ahead and take some time to read through the speech topics, look at the graphic organizers, and try and go ahead and match and see which ones might fit best. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and place you into breakout rooms. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for taking some time to match the topics and look at the graphic organizer. We did number 1 together. Let's look at number 2. Give your stance on the following. Japan should ban the sale of cats and dogs. What do we think might be the best, or some of the different graphic organizers that could be used? Okay, I see in the chat box, someone also mentioned the persuasion map. Yeah, this is a great one because the goal is either to ban the sale of pets or not ban the sale of pets. Because this is a persuasive presentation, the persuasion map is a great one to have. As I mentioned before, the spider map or cluster word web could also work. Let's keep going. Number 3, take a school rule and share your opinion on whether it is necessary or not. And notice this actually gives a structure. First, students should share their opinion, then their reason, examples, and conclusion. So which of the graphic organizers might work well to have students brainstorm for this? Okay, so someone said persuasion math again. That's good if you already know what to choose. However, maybe you're not sure as a student and you don't know whether it is necessary or not. So maybe a school rule, for example, is to take off your shoes before entering the school and wearing slippers. And then if the student is not sure whether they agree or disagree with that rule, they can use a T-chart, right? So in one subject, they can say they agree, one can be disagree, and they can list as many ideas of why they feel that way. And then what they can do is that will help them see which side seems to be stronger so that they can go ahead and choose that side for some ideas as far as choosing which side to pick. That also goes for, same with number 2, students are not sure, they can brainstorm first which side they pick by adding all of the reasons and then seeing which one has the most reasons. Great, so let's look at number 4. Give a presentation about social changes in the role of gender with a graphic. And this, I mean, this meant like a chart or a graph, and suggest your opinion. Okay, so this is definitely a more abstract topic. Which map might be really helpful? Which graphic organizer? Okay, so with this one, if there is already a graphic, it may depend on that. But if students are choosing one and finding one, I see cluster word web, so they can have the graphic in the middle, and then some ideas about what that graphic means about gender. Can also have a Venn diagram as well, right? So these are comparing two things, what are similar, what are different. So when we think of gender, we might think of some of the gender differences here and add the different genders here to compare them. Yeah, really nice work. Okay, number 5. Research what high school students from another country eat for lunch. What high school students from another country eat for lunch. Prepare to present this and explain what kind of food they eat and how they prepare their food, and how it is different from Japan. Okay, so this one has many different parts to it. Maybe the student has already selected the country. Which one might be a good one for this? There's a lot of describing, right? Yeah, so there is the describing wheel. So the topic could be, for example, high school lunch in America. And we might add some descriptions of what high school lunch is, how much it costs. So we could add the prices. We could say hamburgers, pizza, chips, soda, whatever there is, we can add that in. And then when it comes to the part of comparing and contrasting between the two countries, we can say Japan, high school lunch in Japan, high school lunch in America, and then we can compare what is similar and what is different. For example, in America, we might write something like, there is a school cafeteria where you must purchase lunch. Something similar might be that students, upperclassmen, may go off campus to buy lunch somewhere, right? Or maybe that's just America. Great. Number 6, prepare a speech on the best innovator. You should include his or her career and achievements, what you can learn, and how you will apply what you have learned. from him or her in the future. Wow, so this one also is multi-part, and so we might use different graphic organizers to answer different parts of the question. Okay, career and achievements. So maybe something like the sequence chart or the timeline, right? We can have a timeline of the innovator's life, when they were born, what they did, some of the key inventions, if they're still alive, then what they're doing now, or if they died, when they died, right? So we could use a timeline for the dates of an event. Great. As far as applying what you have learned, definitely something like the spider map or the cluster word web would work well. So students can generate some ideas on what lessons they can take away. All right. Let's keep going. Number 7, what do you think a future city where people of all ages can live comfortably would look like? Great. So this is really idea generation. I might do something like a free write for this question, where students are just writing down all of the possible ideas. Okay, so I heard cluster word web or spider map. All right. 8, present a step-by-step of how to cook your favorite dish. So this one, I think step-by-step chart is probably the most obvious one, right? Step 1, wash the rice and put it in the rice cooker, right? Step 2, and whatever the steps are, right? Really nice work. All right, last one. You have been chosen to give a speech during graduation. Create an inspirational and memorable speech for your classmates. So it's important for students to think about what is part of a graduation speech and what are some things that they might say. Now, this isn't necessarily an informative speech or a persuasive speech. This is really a motivational speech, right? So they might think of what might be the different things to encourage and motivate students, right? They might do something like a word web or a spider map. But maybe they also want to document all of the different events that happen throughout high school. So they could use something like a timeline, a sequence chart, or even a flow chart of what's happened. So first year of senior high school, this is the trip that we went on. Second year of senior high school, here are the things, some memorable events and things that happened, etc. All right, really nice work, everyone. I hope that this was really helpful in having you think about ways to have your students brainstorm and organize for their speeches. All right, let's go ahead and keep going. So yes, so these are our graphic organizers. And this will be available to download. These graphic organizers, by the way, were created by HMH, but they are free to use, and there are different templates. All right, so I talked a little bit about tone and how the purpose of the speech may determine the tone that students have. So with tone, there may be different tones that are used, such as funny, personal, passionate, direct, sincere. So this is really up to the topic of the speech and the student's personality and how they would like to approach it. But it's important to get your students to start thinking about tone, because that will have an impact on their speech. So let's look at an example. For the Tep-Cup, the topic is to think about an allure of Tokyo, and students are going to select something about Tokyo that is really alluring, such as some product that is very popular in Tokyo, or a specific building, or something about Tokyo for the Tep-Cup. So here are two examples that show very different tones. One of them is a funny tone and one of them is a personal tone. So I want you to notice how tone can really impact how the students would approach the speech. So here's the funny tone. So you're in Tokyo, huh? Get ready to have more fun than a sumo wrestler at an all-you-can-eat buffet. First, stop. The Tokyo Sky Tree. It's so tall, even Godzilla needs a selfie stick. And if you see a robot waiter in a restaurant, don't worry, it won't steal your dessert, just your heart. So notice that these are making some jokes. It's a little more lighthearted and funny in the style that the speech is, right? Or maybe students might take on a more personal tone, something that feels really unique to that person and is very emotional deeply. So here's an example of that. When I explored Tokyo, one place that left me awestruck was a serene Meiji shrine. Walking through the massive wooden torii gate and into the lush forest felt like stepping into a different world. As I offered my wishes at the shrine, I felt a deep connection to Japan's spiritual traditions. So notice that this is a little more serious, but really is about that student very personally and is a lot more emotional. So tone can have a very big impact. I would recommend giving some models and some examples to show how big of a difference tone can make on a presentation, right? So you could use these two examples, or you might want to set a specific tone for the presentation. For example, some presentations, it may be more open what tone that students take, but other presentations require more serious tone, and you may want to mention that this is supposed to be more formal. Okay, so some tips on organizing a presentation. So I like to share with students the Oreo method. This is a structure, an acronym, to help students make sure that they have all parts, especially with a persuasive presentation. The first is to give the opinion in the introduction. It is very, very important for students to clearly state what their position is. If we don't know that at the beginning, it makes it very confusing for the audience. And so in order to make sure our students are very clear from the beginning, we might tell them they must follow the Oreo method, including the first step being, in the introduction, share your opinion. The second one is give the reason for your opinion. Now, we may have 3 reasons, or we may tell students they need to include 3 reasons for their opinion. And I'll talk a little bit later about why I like the number 3. We then want to make sure that the reason is explained. And then at the end, we will finish the presentation once again by sharing our opinion. So notice that it's like the Oreo cookie where it's a sandwich. We start with the opinion and we end with the opinion. This is the structure that I like to give my students, especially for persuasive speeches. So let's start with the introduction. In the introduction, I will give my students some sentence starters to help them start the presentation in a strong way. I like to have students start with a hook. So a hook, like a fish hook, right, when you're going fishing, is to catch the attention of the audience. I like to ask students to share something like a surprising or unknown fact or a story. And then I give them some sentences that will help them in their speech. So they can say things like, well, today I am going to discuss why Meiji Jingu is the best shrine in all of Tokyo. We spent a lot of time thinking and decided that we should all be able to dye our hair in school. This is important to us because blah, blah, blah. And in the remainder of the speech, I will. So this is a little bit like writing as well. But by giving these sentences, you can help encourage students to sound more natural and to then be able to build off of the structure of this to really give their opinions. Here are a few other sentence starters that I like to give students. So this is something you can share with your students. So things that you have in the opening or the introduction. So the main thing I want to focus on today, I would like to share. And remember, in Oreo, that beginning, we want to be very clear about what is the opinion. So these sentences help students to make sure they include their opinion. Here are some examples, sentences to give some examples. Okay. And when we're moving from one reason to the next reason, we want to have some transitions, right? So here are some phrases that students can use to transition from one reason to the next reason. And in persuasive speeches, we also have points that we may want to emphasize. So let's get straight to the point. Basically, what I want you to remember is, the bottom line is, these are some great sentences to include at the conclusion, the end of the presentation, or after some important points. Okay, so let's look at the final O in Oreo, which stands for opinion again. And let's think about what is the purpose of the conclusion. It's very important that our students are clear why we use the Oreo method. We start with the opinion, and then at the end, we should also restate the main point or opinion. In the conclusion, I like to tell students that they need to have these things. First is to restate the main point. This way, the audience remembers what was the purpose of your presentation. I then like to summarize the reasons or the arguments, and I make sure to tell students this doesn't mean doing your whole presentation over again, but the very key brief points to remind the audience of their reasons and what they shared. And then this is kind of a bonus, a cherry on the top that I like to ask students to do to elevate their presentations. So I might do this mainly with third-year senior high school students since they are a little more advanced. I might have a cincher or a takeaway. This answers the question, how do you leave the audience with something to remember or think about? So you give a presentation, and mainly there's a purpose, right? Whether that purpose be to change someone's opinion, give them some knowledge, or get them to take some action. So how will you help the audience remember or think about something? Here are some sentence starters that I will give to students that they can say during their presentations in the conclusion. We may all be familiar with phrases like in conclusion, to summarize, and to sum up. There are additional ones that they can use, such as I have one last thought, which is that. So I want to end with. And so I am going to leave you now with. These are all phrases that you can also have students use. And this is something that I will actually share with students so that they can choose and decide what sentences they might use. So let's take a few minutes to discuss what so far might be useful for your students. We'll go ahead and get into breakout rooms and share for about 3 minutes. Was there anything so far that was helpful? Okay, great. I hope that there were some takeaways so far from what I had shared. Here are some final tips that I like to tell my students when structuring their presentations and thinking about when they're creating their presentations. The first is called segmentation theory. Let's go ahead and look at this graph. On this axis, we can see attention. So high attention, low attention. And this is time in minutes. What you can see here is that during a presentation, right? So here are the slides, imaginary presentation. Attention is very high, often from the audience at the beginning. However, very, very quickly, the attention drops down. So we see in the middle, the attention goes down very quickly. We have low attention from the audience. Okay? And we may notice this in our own classes, where students are very attentive at the beginning, right? But their attention might go down. Maybe they're thinking about, what am I going to eat for lunch? Or something else, right? You may also notice this during this presentation. Maybe your attention was highest at the beginning, but maybe you were a little bit more distracted and were paying less attention during the middle. Now, notice that the attention does pick up back at the end, but not as much as the beginning. So what does this tell us? This tells us that the most important times during a presentation are at the beginning and at the end. When I share this with students, I tell them this so they understand why it's so important to have a strong beginning and a clear ending, because those two times are when students, the audience members, are paying attention the most. I also like to share about the rule of 3. So I mentioned that when I ask students to give reasons, I like them to give 3. And this is because oftentimes students, not just students, but all humans tend to remember things better when they are grouped in 3. So for example, we know that a traffic light has 3, red, yellow, and green, right? We can remember with the 3. If a traffic light had 5 lights or 2 lights, it might be not as easy. Okay? We may also hear this in language. So a common phrase that I have heard in America is live, laugh, and love. So these are 3 words that some people use together to be motivational. But notice there are 3 words, right? And there's a reason for that. Humans tend to remember 3 things that are in 3 better. So the reason I mention this is why I ask students to give 3 reasons. It's much easier when students are giving 3 reasons for the audience to remember. I also, and this is really for more advanced students, so maybe for third year senior high school students, is to give a conclusion or call to action. So especially with persuasive speeches, we want to change the opinion of people, but we might also want them to take some sort of action. In the example for the graphic organizers, there was the one about the No Plastic Waste campaign. Convince your classmates to join the No Plastic Waste campaign. Maybe in that speech, it would be very beneficial if the speech ended with a call to action. So what is a call to action? This is asking the audience to do something or think about something afterwards. For example, for the No Plastic Waste campaign, the speaker might ask the audience, try to use reusable bottles instead of plastic bottles. Let's all bring reusable bottles to school. Now, this is an actual action that the audience members can take, and that will be more likely that the audience will actually do something with what they have learned. All right, so here are my references for today's presentation. Thank you very much. I hope that this was helpful in getting you to think about how you will support your students when they are organizing a speech and preparing for a presentation.